Okay, I'm gonna do a roll call vote. I am here, Miss Allen, Mr. Kitson,
Brother.
Ms. Shippert,
Yes.
Mr. Bally, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Hudson is appointed to the meeting for to have a quorum, and he is here. Ms. Hinkle is here. Ms. Duffy is not right now. We do not have the minutes done yet, so we'll approve those at the next meeting. The purpose of today's meeting is to look at the wind energy conversion system and get this hopefully wrapped up and moved on. So Alice, do you want to identify the changes that we have, or how would you guys like to? Oh, shoot. How would you like to do this?
So I met with Stephanie with Justine last Thursday, and we went through the discussions that were had from last Monday's meeting, as well as the Farm Bureau's input and things of that nature, and just went through and started making the changes based off of what came out of this committee last week. Let's see. So we changed in the first section, or under section B with definitions, we did change the definition of AMA to reflect an agreement between the Illinois Department of Ag and the utility company. Previously, it stated that it was between the landowner and the utility company. Let's see. Under prohibition, section C, we did rearrange some of that language. There was a stipulation under this section that would have been more appropriate under the application section, so we did move that. Under D, design standards, I will be removing that requirement regarding 1014.3 of the Lee County Code for fences, because that is not applicable to the wind ordinance. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to recall everything that we went through. Under E, application requirements, we did change the requirement from 30 physical copies to 10 plus 1 electronic copy. The same with the exhibits, that they would be able to present 2 physical copies and then a digital copy as well.
Why is
there, Alice, please?
That would be under E, application requirements.
why did we change that?
Oh,
I believe-
why? Because we end up with just binders piled up in our office that aren't being used. And so with getting a digital copy, we can then email it to the board members as well as put it on board. So it's right there at their disposal. Would you prefer to go back to the paper copies?
I don't think that board members necessarily always know that there's paper copies available. I think they just need to be supplied to them. So at the county board meeting, either before, at the convenience when they are actually printed, to be placed on their desk. So that way they've got them. But I know, like, I like my paper copy for these petitions, and I do read through it. But to your point, how many have you given away in some of the projects? But some of the board members might not even know they exist.
I like that, if we get to using onboard more, I'm ups, I don't know if upset's the correct word, but discouraged that with this stuff we're getting, I got this email last night. Coming to my personal email, it's on my computer at home. It's not on board. I don't believe. I didn't see it. I wasn't gonna print out 22 pages, read it. This morning, as Alice and I discussed, I've had a busy morning already. It seems like, well, honestly, I didn't have time to read this.
And that's why we want to go line by line. I read the previous one. This is the changes that she made. I'll be honest, I didn't have time to read it either. And that's why we've got the meeting here. But there's something to say to the physical copy, but I think it is the mindset that we do need to change to go to digital. I know
You
part,
if you've got it digital and you really want the physical,
then you can get it.
get it.
So 10 is perfectly fine. I do, what do I want to say? I know that part of the next cycle that if I were on it, I know part of the ITs is to get all county board members, county email addresses. So hopefully that can feed on through on board as well. So that'll be changed. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Going down under. It's still under the application requirements section. We have number 1L, we added that paragraph.
Okay.
Number 2, right straight down from that, we did add that requirement for having a hearing facilitator. That is actually in the zoning board's rules of procedure, that it does have the ability to have a hearing facilitator at the cost of the applicant, but we did put it in here as well as number 3. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Also, number 2 also includes a certified shorthand reporter.
Oh, I'm sorry, before we get too far.
Sure.
This incorporates a lot of stuff from our last meeting brought up by the audience. Do they have copies of this?
There are copies here if anyone is looking for one. Most of them would have gotten the email last night.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that the people who had input this had copies of this. Sure they had this. Otherwise. Regular dog, but.
I think we were last.
Thank you, I appreciate the interruption to do that.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, appreciate it.
Okay,
Okay, if we go on to the next page under number 7. You look towards the end of the paragraph, the special use permit shall thereafter automatically be modified to limit the legal description. Oh, sorry, next sentence. If no building permit is secured by the end of 36 months, then the special use permit automatically becomes null and void. If no building permit is secured by the end of 30 months, an extension may be requested by the applicant and may be granted by the Lee County Board. So we did add that so that this does give them the opportunity to come in and request an extension on the permit. The reason we put the 30 months is just to kind of get them in the mindset that, you know, if you know by that point, get in, don't be waiting until 36 months to come in and ask for the extension. We want to know as soon as possible so that we're all on the same page.
We have a limit on how long that extension would be. I mean, are you granting a 1-year extension, a 3-year, you know, I mean.
Typically up to the county board, what they want to do, they would have that discretion. I think probably at that time, you know, our office would make a recommendation as to how long we should extend it, but I think that would need to come from the county board.
I think a lot of factors would have to go into it. PJM, supplies.
Right.
We've got monkeypox, who knows what's going on, right? But the county board can make that decision at that time of length of extension.
Is it limited to 1 or would there be multiple extensions and whatever happens?
I think there could be multiple extensions, and it's not defined in here that it's limited to 1. So it can have multiple extensions because you know the environment that we're living in today.
I'm
So
just posing
yeah, you're asking the
questions
question.
that pop in my brain.
Nope, but I don't believe it. It does not say anything about limiting the number of extensions and more importantly, like, I think it offers. I don't think, if I were on the county board, I wouldn't go more than 3 years. And then make them come back again if we couldn't get to the production time period, but
And I think it's going to depend on the circumstances, whether you guys would actually grant a second extension. You know, if we know it's beyond their control, something to do with PJM or supply chain. But, you know, if they just can't get their ducks in a row, I think we'll know that, and that will determine whether we would grant a second extension beyond a first one, so. Under number 17, shadow flicker, we did add a sentence that a written and signed waiver may be obtained from the affected landowner for the 30-hour requirement on shadow flicker, which we didn't have before, so that way they can negotiate with the landowners.
did you take out the 10 to 30 on the shadow flicker?
I'm not seeing it in here, but it should have stayed in here, so I will ask Stephanie to add that back in. Is
Thank
it?
you.
Okay.
What page?
Oh, that's okay. That's right. We did divide it up between,
Oh, nope.
Where's it at?
should be under the operational standards condition, which would be about 4 pages beyond where we're at.
There it is. 6. Oh, yep, got it. G6. Yep, that is G6. So, yep, it's still there.
So what we did was, because that's more of an operational condition as opposed to what is required for the application, we did separate some of those to make it clear what would be required as part of the application and what is required while they're operating. We did add in Dave Anderson's consulting fund.
What section?
That would be, it appears to be number 25 under E.
Okay.
Under interference. We did, on paragraph B, we did include line of sight internet or similar telecommunication methods. When these projects initially came into Lee County, there was the issue with the broadcast residential television. People are now having internet TV, things of that nature. So we did expand on that language so that if people are experiencing issues beyond broadcast television, that it can be addressed. On the next page, again, under shadow flicker, we did add a sentence that a written or signed waiver may be obtained from the affected landowner for this requirement for the 10 to 30 hours of shadow flicker.
And the next section B,
Mhm.
you know, if there is shadow flicker and the applicant shall program any turbines causing that to shut down during the period of time that or shadow flicker is anticipated to occur. Let's say that it happens annually or semi-annually, the sun is at a certain time. What length of time do they have to make this adjustment? You know, it happens when the sun's at a certain angle. It moves on, it's not happening. When are they gonna come in and make that adjustment? So it happens again, or is there a time limit, I guess?
This shouldn't be an issue based off of the studies that they do with shadow flicker. They're gonna identify, there's enough science out there.
So they're gonna know.
Yeah.
They should have a pretty good idea. Typically where they have the issues with the shadow flicker is like 2 times a year. And it's so many, minutes per day or whatnot. So they'll know based off the studies of where they'll potentially have issues with shadow flicker and where they may need to mitigate. And then once they're up and running, I think then it just kind of falls on to the landowner to complain if they feel like they're receiving more shadow flicker than they should be.
Getting a head nod from the developers that they're gonna know the number of hours, the time of day that affects the residents of non-participating residents. So
They're gonna know, but I guess they're knowing. My question is, are they gonna act on what they know?
well, they have to provide that information in the hearing, the zoning hearing of the number of hours of shadow flicker per house. And that if it is over 30, they can get an applicant waiver and how they're gonna mitigate that, but that's gonna be a requirement of the special use.
Okay.
Is where that would fall, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. So when they come in and apply and for the hearing, we actually have a copy of their shadow flicker study. And it identifies which receptors are going to receive more than 30 hours, which are going to receive between the 10 and 30. So we kind of have an idea of which ones we need to be looking at when they are up and running. So then we rely on the landowner, the property owner, to let us know if they feel like there's a problem. And then we would investigate a complaint based on that.
Mr. Hudson asked me, what recourse do we have if they don't comply? The recourse is that they lose their special use permit, gets pulled.
Essentially anything where they're not complying with the ordinance or the conditions, then their permit is at risk.
That's something that they're not gonna put at risk.
Thank you.
Okay.
We did do some reworking of the decommissioning section. We did eliminate some of the previous requirements that have never been utilized. And then we did add language for letters of credit.
Okay.
And I think that pretty much covers The major changes,
section. Section J, number 8. Huh?
What's the title?
Permits.
Okay.
C. 3.3. You'll see the owner operator shall pay the Lee County an administrative fee, the amount of blank dollars per megawatt on an annual basis for the life of the wind energy system. Does everybody see where I'm at?
Yeah.
it's towards the end, should be
You see the chart, Marilyn?
4th page from the back.
Page right before the chart.
And we're
You'll see
looking
it
at
grayed out there.
paragraph
The center of the
3I.
page.
Well, if you're on it, it's really good to highlight it. It's like you said, it's right. Page
Okay, I
in
got
front of
this
this chart.
Chart.
Okay, I'll go back a page.
Yeah,
Okay, where you've got under 3.
okay,
Oh,
okay.
sorry.
You said grayed out and I've got yellow.
I see that. See, I don't have yellow. So,
I'm looking at gray and I see yellow.
okay. Currently, that fee is $55 per megawatt.
And this section was added, and this is based off of what we have done previously with letters of credit. So we look towards Mendota Hills Repower, the Green River Wind resolution, as well as Shady Oaks 2. And these were based off of the resolutions they entered after their special use permit was granted. And at the time, the ordinance called for financial security by escrow. And then if they did anything else, it would have to go before the county board. So they would request this type of process with a letter of credit as an alternate financial security. And that was approved by resolution from the county board. So we are incorporating that language right into the ordinance to eliminate that step that they would have to take after their permit is granted.
My question is, do we keep it at 55? Do we increase it? Do we decrease it? I guarantee you we're not gonna decrease it, right? But I don't know from the developer standpoint what the cost is, what other counties are doing. You guys have a recommendation? That was not working.
Don't pay.
Good. Or just go to this one. It's gotta be the
Yeah, we also haven't seen this in other counties. What we have seen is during the SUP submittal phase, helping pay for attorney fees associated with the SUP submittal. But once the SUP has been granted, there shouldn't be any costs associated with it because most of that legwork has already been completed. So I guess I'm just not sure like what that $15,000 a year would be going to at that point. That's a substantial amount of money to the county. And I'm just not sure how that would be used for the project once the SUP has already been granted.
So this is strictly for the administration of the decommissioning plan and letter of credit. It has nothing to do with the special use permit. It has not exceeded $10,000 per year. I believe one company has a fee of $10,000 a year. Everyone else is based off of the 55 per megawatt.
I guess I'm just maybe a little bit more clarification for me. I'm not following. So to post a letter of credit, I saw that you had to put 50% up after the first year and the remaining 100% at the 8th year. So knowing that those are the only 2 times where you're seeing changes in the letter of credit and the decommissioning plan, it seems like there should only be costs associated with those 2 years in addition to whatever the SUP submittal year is. So there'd be 3 years where I could see that we would need to maybe pay some money to the county to compensate for attorney fees and consultant review processes. But in all those other years during operation, I guess I'm just not clear why there would be $15,000 that we'd have to pay to the county associated with the letter of credit and decommissioning costs.
This was originally drafted by our current board chairman. So without him being here, I can't, the current board chair. So without him being here, I'm not able to comment any further.
The only thing that I would add to this discussion, if I may, is just to remind everybody too, when this topic first came around, Glenn Hughes, he was not on the zoning board of appeals at that time, came to the finance and executive committee meetings. He presented his perspective on a letter of credit from a banking side of view, and then Charlie Boonstra also weighed in and said that it was at no extra risk to the county. So I would propose that we keep it at the $55 per megawatt. It is also phased in much faster than what's required under the AMA. I believe the AMA is over 11 years or 15 years. This is accelerated. You're going to see 50% right after that first anniversary. So I think the county is still well protected in that regard. Just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I agree that we're currently at the 55. Just knowing where we're at, I've got no problem staying at the $55 per megawatt to handle it. And yes, and to your point, Courtney, yes, it is accelerated, but it's just to protect the county as a whole. I think she understands that. So if we want to keep that at 55 as a committee, are we okay with that?
And just so you know, with the AMA, it is phased in over 11 years. We could align with the AMA, but I think we're giving up a lot of protection to the county as a lot can happen within those first few years. We're just kind of leaving ourselves in a bad position. I don't think we aren't getting some of the decommissioning money towards the beginning of the project. So that's why we haven't aligned with what the AMA is doing, and we're doing kind of our own phase in.
What about a fee per megawatt hour?
Fee per megawatt hour for that's coming
You know,
through.
like
That would be
like a half cent or a cent?
that'd be a Charlie question.
Certainly with the Inflation Reduction Act, we need to look at this ordinance as more than just the project that's on the table today. We need to look at this as a county and what's best for our county, whether we're going to say that this is administrative or it's not, or it's for a decommissioning. I think we would be remiss in terms of not considering some kind of per megawatt hour fee on both wind and solar projects in Lee County.
I think, as we've discussed, I think that needs to be discussed with Charlie and to see the best way to fit that into whether it's the ordinance, whether it's.
I believe no ordinance should be considered until that question is settled.
Then, okay,
Okay, that's all I got.
anything else?
Not for me. I don't know if any of the developers had any additional questions based off of the changes made.
Hello, just want to say thank you all for letting us come back and provide some additional comments today. I guess we had some more thoughts on the shadow flicker changes. Hoping there could be an ability to, I guess there's 2 sections there. Wanted to see some changes to both, or at least have an opportunity to provide comment on some of the changes that have been made. One of the big changes was removal of non-participating. So now it just reads on properties. So if there's shadow flicker on a property, that would entail like hitting cornfields and not actual residences or structures where there are people. So I think the removal of some of these words had just changed the context significantly of what shadow flicker is now affecting. And so I just wanted to maybe bring that to attention and see if that was intentional or if we could have more debate on that.
No, it should be on the primary structure.
Yeah, where are you at? I'm
That's in
looking
the
at shadow
second-
flicker under 17.
We're in operating, so it should be
Okay. Back.
G6. It's either A or B, so I'm pulling it up right now. A, thank you.
So where it says case by case basis for these properties estimated to receive less than 10 hours, that should say Yeah, any affected property, any affecting any property owner should be affecting any primary dwelling.
So when we originally provided these red lines, the full sentence, it started with for all non-participating properties, and then you read further and it says that's in a residence existing and occupied at the time of SUP application submittal. By removing that end of the sentence and also non-participating, the way it reads is just very, very broad, and I don't think gets at the original intention here. So our thoughts were maybe to revise where it says properties to include what we had suggested, the non-participating properties with that final sentence at the end, or going back to the language I think that was proposed last week, naming specific residences, schools, or I guess primary structure could be another alternative. But I also think it's very important to recognize that we can only do so much when it comes to shadow flicker mitigation. And if there's not a structure in place at the time that our SUP is submitted, of course, we can do no mitigation and at that time afterwards. I mean, we can work to mitigate, but in the second paragraph, you're not allowing us to mitigate if there are more shadow flicker hours. And because that residence or that structure isn't there when we originally submitted our SUP and did our studies, I think that that language in B should be allowed so that we have the opportunity to try to mitigate before we have to turn off a turbine.
So under A, it just needs to incorporate primary structure. Well, primary structure is what's defined in the definitions. Yeah. And to your point of a residence going up after a solar or a wind is in place, it goes back to it's which one trumps it, right? So right now we've got a residence in place and a solar and a wind going up. If we've got the wind already up, I can't punish you guys for somebody who wants to build a house
Right.
that's gonna get 100 hours of shadow flicker. That's on them. So it's the same protection to allow you guys because you're already there.
Yeah, and so that's why we had the language added in A that said in a residence existing and occupied, or in a primary structure existing and occupied at the time of SUP application submittal. But that was removed in the version that was sent out last night.
Got that? Okay. Cool.
And just so you know, we've never had an issue with the language up to this point.
Saying primary structure existing and occupied. But let's say it's a rental property or something and they're between tenants. I don't want to split hairs, but if it's a primary residence, why do we need to say occupied?
I think for that point, we're just trying to get at maybe abandoned homes that are technically residences, but do not have people living there or have not lived there for a certain amount of time. Maybe we could add in a time limit, has been unoccupied for more than 1 year or 2 years.
So the definition of primary structure is for each property, the structure that one or more persons occupy the majority of the time on property for either business or personal reasons. So I believe our definition covers it.
Yeah, your definition covers it.
Yeah, but I don't think we need the word occupied in here.
In the shadow flicker.
Shadow flicker.
No, I think it just needs to be primary structure.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm okay with that, but
I am too.
we've got occupied covered in the definition.
Correct. So I think we're wanting to see that change as a committee.
And then in B, I think, right, the way it reads now, I think there was another error on our end. We didn't add the red line showing in the primary structure. It says on. We want to make sure that says in. And then allowing the developer or the operator to try to mitigate if a residence or a primary structure is already receiving more than 30 hours. The way it's reading right now, it appears that the WEX turbines would need to shut down. I think that there could be other mitigation measures considered that would allow that residence to receive less than 30 hours before that has to be considered.
I'm gonna tell you that as a board member, that if I came to it and had a project that presented to me a shadow flicker greater than 30 hours to a resident of Lee County, I'm gonna vote no on it. Like that's just, so that's just where I'm at as a county board member, because we do want to reduce to 30 hours or less. So now it becomes placement of the projects for the developer.
To clarify, this is once the project has already been constructed and a verified complaint is received. So this is already after the project is existing and operating. If a residence or primary structure receives more than 30 hours, the way this document's written right now, it shows that that turbine needs to be shut down to limit that amount of shadow flicker. What we're asking is the ability to pursue other mitigation measures to reduce that time below 30 before having to consider shutting down that wind turbine.
So my question is, how accurate are your studies then?
This is not regarding a study. This is regarding their applicant receives a verified complaint. So this is after the project's up and running, after we've already done our studies. Let's say someone's receiving 32 hours because.
But you reported in the committee that it was going to be 29. So.
Right. So this is an event where we just have a complaint and we would have to, one, verify that it's true. And then two, if it is, would we have the ability to try to mitigate below 30?
So you just told me that your study is not accurate. If your study's either accurate or it's not accurate. So if you come to the committee and say it's going to be 29 hours of shadow flicker and you build the project and it's 32, then why should I believe your study on any of the shadow flicker? That's where I'm at.
Well, I mean, I think with every intention possible, we want our studies to be even more accurate than what you guys expect. But I'm talking about in the event, this could be me, this could be another developer, this could be anyone. But I think it would be good to have language in here, given a circumstance where something's not 100% correct, but it's 99% correct 99% of the time. If there's that 1% occurrence, I think it would be helpful to have language that allows the developer or operator of the wind project to reduce 2 additional hours without having to shut down a wind turbine.
I think this just goes back to the waiver. Anything that exceeds 30, they can get a waiver from the landowner. If the landowner doesn't agree to it, then they would have to mitigate otherwise. So I mean, we can include that language. We have it under.
I agree. You've got it, written and signed waiver, maybe obtained from the affected, and maybe you just include that language, a written and signed waiver may be obtained from the affected landowner for this requirement into section B as well. That works for you guys. If they do go over 30 for some reason, which I don't suspect they will, but if they do, I'm a big believer in everything's for sale. So.
Then the reason why I was phrasing it that way was just how it was written in section 6B. Right now, I just was phrasing it the way it's written, just so that'd be a minor text change to just include mitigation measures before having to automatically assume shutdown was required.
Yeah, let's just include in section B, a written and signed waiver may be obtained from the affected landowner for this requirement. It leaves it very vague for them to be able to work with the non-participating.
Okay.
Is there anything else, Emily?
I think, yeah, I mean, with that, this is coming in as the way this section is written here is just when there's a complaint received. So when a complaint is received, I don't think a waiver is going to be the appropriate measure to go forward with. And so all I was saying here is in this language, I think it would be beneficial to just allow a way to mitigate the shadow flicker being experienced. Okay.
There is actually a 7-step process by which
Oh, I don't know if that would apply for this kind of,
I 100%
would it?
it's a,
Because they do a separate complaint form and stuff within.
but I think it would still follow it'd be a separate form, but it would still follow the same steps as to how to remedy the situation and move through the process. I think
Okay.
it'd be very, very similar.
So I mean, essentially, I guess I'm not sure what we're arguing here. If a turbine is producing over 30 hours of shadow flicker, it's already in violation of the ordinance. I mean, they would have to do something to alleviate that violation.
And once
So,
again, if they don't, then they risk losing their permit. Now,
Right.
they're able to work, but I think we added a written and signed waiver may be obtained from the affected landowner to that last sentence in A can go to the last sentence in B as well. And now it becomes a waiver between the developer and the non-participating landowner. And it removes Lee County out of it. And if it can't be affected, then yeah, it's got to be shut off to 30. 30 is our threshold.
Is there any mention of the new, or will there be any mention of the new complaint process mentioned in this ordinance? Because throughout this ordinance, there's a lot of references to different types of complaints that might be received. If there's going to be a new process in the county, will that be mentioned in the ordinance just to make sure there's not confusion later on with
process,
developer should expect or the complaint?
what he just gave you was supposed to be specific to zoning violations, and typically under these projects, the developer is directed to work with the zoning office to come up with a procedure for handling complaints. And so I guess
You don't believe that it would fit.
I don't.
Well, I think it would be that if nothing got remedied. I think there would be a step process if it didn't get remedied with the developer, non-participating landowner, and the zoning office. That would be the process by which.
Potentially, and that's, I guess I just haven't thought about implementing that process to this type of project. So I would have to think about that and whether it would work or not. We usually try to come up with, develop a form and, who's the contact person, how many days that they have to respond, how many days do they have to resolve the complaint. So we do that on a project by project basis. So we can look into incorporating that new process and see if it works.
Maybe we'll look at that, but like I said, that's the process we're looking at currently doing for, to your point. So. And all the complaints, 99% of the complaints are gonna come during construction phase.
Outside of decommission or outside of shadow flicker, I did have a couple other comments.
Okay,
With ADLS, I think we've been supportive with the county on this. We understand the concerns and the desire for the ADLS, but it's very important to keep the language that it has to be approved by the FAA. We cannot build structures that aren't approved by the FAA. And if the FAA does not allow us to have ADLS on a certain tower, and the county is not allowing to have a tower that doesn't have ADLS, that means we can't put a tower there, or that means we might not have a project. So I just stress, and of course, like, we want to work with you on this, but we have to follow federal requirements. And so I really stress that that language is kept. Otherwise, it could substantially hurt the county with projects that might not, or turbines that might not be approved by the FAA, and then, completely killing a project if they can't be built.
I believe that we have to follow what's most restrictive. So if the FFA says, no, you cannot have this type of system for a project, I think the county would accept that and allow them to move forward based on their recommendation.
The way it's written right now, I would imagine that we would have to come back to you guys and request a variance, allowing us to have a structure in place that does not have ADLS. The way that it's currently written, I would imagine that would be the process. And then you all would have to approve that variance for us so that we could move forward with the project as approved by the FAA.
So
you're
this,
talking about section E,
That's 12B.
12B, yep.
so this does say ADLS or equivalent system. So I'm not sure if there's other systems out there that would be an alternative if ADLS is not permitted by FAA. That we would want them to consider prior to not requiring them. I mean, we can change the language to,
It's slightly contradicting as well with what you have in the operational section under 7 lighting, which reads that the applicant shall use minimal lighting in WEX projects. No tower lighting other than the normal security lighting shall be permitted except as the best available technology allowed by the FAA. I think slightly different because that's maybe referring to like site lighting at maybe the substation or near the bottom of towers, but the language there is allowing certain lighting based on approval by FAA, and I would just recommend that it's the same when mentioned about ADLS.
What, where were you talking about the lighting? Where's that at?
It's under the operational section toward the end of the document in number 7,
Yep, there it is.
like just after shadow flicker. It's not clear what lighting is being referred to here. I was imagining it was maybe like site lighting for security purposes or safety purposes.
looks like.
But then the mention of FAA, it made me think that it potentially also had something to do with the lighting on the top of towers, which contradicts with what I had mentioned earlier in 12B.
It looks like 7 lighting under the operational section discusses all lighting. Should use minimal lighting, no tower lighting other than normal security lighting.
I don't see what the problem is.
I guess I'm struggling with that as well. I feel like we're splitting hairs here.
I think just for a developer that's coming in trying to permit, following your ordinance and making sure that we're fully in compliance, the way the special use permit submittal section is written, if there were a reason why we could not put ADLS on the top of the tower because it did not get FAA approval, the way it's written now, I don't believe we would be able to have that tower exist because you're requiring ADLS. But then when we read the operational section, it doesn't quite follow that logic. So I guess I'm asking the county for clarification here. Would we be able to construct a tower if it's in compliance with the FAA and does not have ADLS because the FAA will not allow it?
Yes,
But it says ADLS or equivalent. I think that's what,
that's where it comes in, or
Yeah.
equivalent. So the FFA says, no, you can't use ADLS. It has to be the constant lights that we're currently used to today. It is the constant lights that
I
we're
think the
currently used to.
equivalent covers problem.
I would or equivalent would sound like some other similar lighting system that's not always on. It would match what the ADLS is requiring, which is where it's only blinking as a plane is near. The current lights are constantly blinking at night, which is the alternative to ADLS, but is not a similar, it's not an equivalent, yes. I would just recommend keeping the language that we had offered in our recommendations. Just ensuring that it's approved by the FAA. Which already kind of aligns with what you wrote in 7 in the operational section.
I don't have a problem with shoring up the language that if the FFA refuses to permit it, but I want to make it clear that if they have to flat out deny a permit, it's not based on a recommendations, well, this project really wouldn't need one. Even if FFA doesn't really think they need one, we would still want it. So that's all I'm concerned about. If
I'm perfectly fine with the way it's written today. To the point of it says ADLS or equivalent systems. If it comes back from the FFA that says, no, it needs to be that would be an equivalent system, but it has to be, to your point, a complete and utter denial by the FFA. And I understand the technology may not be there today. And that's part of the reason why the denial system may happen, but we're building this ordinance for the next, who knows how many years.
And that's the reason for the or equivalent system, because we know technology will change as years goes on, and there may be something better, you know, in the next 10 years or so. So,
Yeah, so you pretty well hit it right on the head, right? Like, we're trying to, you're gonna light the base. I probably haven't even know. I've driven by 3,000 windmills at the middle of the night and I never noticed the lights on the base. Don't care about the lights on the base. I've never noticed them because they're being minimized. Whether it's to protect security reasons for around the door, make sure some kid on a four-wheeler doesn't hit it, whatever it may be. But we don't want a tower lighting there for security lighting. So I think it makes sense where it's at. And to your point, your construction is only going from 6:30 to 9, or whatever it is in the system. So
I had one other comment in section 15 under setbacks. In the previous version, you all were allowing a sort of easement that would allow us to sort of work with a landowner, maybe a non-participating landowner. That language was removed in addition to the language that we had suggested, which it's more typically considered a waiver. So within our project boundary, not all landowners will be signed up, which is why setbacks, yes, are important, but sometimes people are not signed up, but we would be able to negotiate with them a waiver, allowing us to be a certain distance from their house or from their property line that is less than 3.0 times the tip height. I think that language is very important. It puts the ability to work with folks back in their hands and their community and kind of making those decisions for themselves. Of course, if a landowner doesn't want it, then we follow what's written here and we're 3.0 times the tip height away from them. But in the event that, you know, they're supportive of it or they don't mind, we would be able to be a little bit closer, which allow us a little bit more flexibility with the design of the turbine layout. Just the whole section 15, it's mentioned multiple times, it'd be in B and C. The ability to have a waiver. Actually, it's an A as well. So A, B, and C.
so this is gonna have to go back to probably Charlie, because it's a legal question. I guess I don't know the benefits of a setback easement versus a waiver. So I think we need to understand that before we include one or the other.
Absolutely, I would suggest getting Charlie's input, but from like a legal perspective, it's considered a waiver as opposed to an easement. But run that through Charlie, he's county's counsel.
And then as she was saying, it is written as an easement in D, but it was removed from sections A, B, and C. So I guess maybe just like some clarity on maybe why it was removed from those other sections, but kept in D.
Also, didn't this committee agree to go back to the 3.1 times the height of the turbine?
yes,
I
we
believe
did.
we
Okay.
did, yes.
So that will need to be changed as well.
So understand so question for Charlie is understand the difference between easement and waiver.
When to use
When to
each
use the
one.
correct wording, but I think it sets in there that this whole section does allow for a waiver. This is the standard, and if you work with your non-participating or even participating, there can be a waiver set in place. I think you're probably right, Courtney, that the word should be waiver instead of easement, but
Those are some of the major items I was able to look through for the meeting today. Thank you.
I just want to add, I don't want to keep up. But they can, the FAA.
How much? I'm sorry.
The FAA can approve the system overall and tell you that they don't want this tower to have it or this tower to have it, just so you understand that. So they can approve the system. But they can tell you that certain towers won't have it. So I just want to make sure you understand.
and so I'm gonna play the ignorance card, right?
Okay,
Because we haven't dealt with ADLS. We know that that's technology that we want in the Lee County.
right.
And I think everybody in this room understands the reason for it.
Right.
I think part of it is until we permit a process, a parcel or a project, we really don't know what to expect from it, because
Right.
how many times have you guys contacted the FAA in regards to an ADLS system in Lee County? Well, you're not going to because it wasn't required. Now it may change because we'll find out, hey, does Lee County have even a fit for ADLS? And we may try to do one project, they'll be like, oh my God, you guys are idiots. Like, this will never work. So,
My opinion is probably a little bit different. But to me, this meets the legal definition of a variance. So a variance is something that's just not a mere convenience to the petitioner. It's a hardship. So if you have the FAA telling you, no, you absolutely can't do that, that's a hardship and we would qualify for a variance. Chris, what do you think on that?
The variance is just that. And the only time the county really should approve a variance is if it's a proven hardship, it's not a monetary thing. It's for a hardship.
Yeah, so my only concern is that the FAA says the system is good, but these two towers can't have it. The hardship for us is that then we would have to come back to the county and get a variance for those two towers. That's my concern but the way it's written, it seems like procedurally, those two towers would need a variance.
Yeah, so what?
Yeah, it's a timing issue. So that's the concern, is that is procedurally, we want to make sure that if the FAA tells us that those two towers, and sometimes just so you know, it can drag on.
you would know that prior to.
Not always. No. Yeah, because yeah.
So we have to permit or get approval from the FAA with the exact coordinate where we're going to place a turbine, like out to like the 6th or 7th decimal. So very, very specific location. With the way the SUP application is required, we can provide you guys a rough outline of where we're planning to place turbines. But until we have our final design and we're submitting our building permit application and know those exact points, that's when we submit that information to the FAA, and then can take up to 3-4 months to get information back from them to know if that turbine is going to be permitted at that location, and at that location if we can have ADLS or if we have to require some other lighting system. So all we're asking, as Courtney mentioned, yes, we could come back from a variance, but that could delay when we could start construction, because then we'd have to, if we don't get approval from the board and we'd have to relocate that turbine, we'd have to get approval again from the FAA. So what we're asking here is to avoid that timing process. If we just write in the ordinance that it has to have, or ADLS allowed if approved by the FAA, then everything is smooth and fine, because we would know that if we can't place it because FAA doesn't require it or doesn't allow it, then we can put the normal lighting system at that one location or two locations where those turbines aren't allowed to have ADLS.
This be a question for Mr. Boonstra.
We could,
Does a liability possibility here?
I mean, we could, I think it's just a matter of changing some of the language. I'm wondering if we just state that all WEX turbines shall use ADLS or equivalent system to reduce the impact of nighttime lighting on nearby residents, communities, and migratory birds as permitted by the FAA. So then I don't know if that would secure it, but then we're saying that they have to use it as it's permitted by FAA. So if FAA says only 20 of their 25 towers can have the lights, then that's how they would have to proceed.
Is there some mechanism that could, I mean, once they provided documentation, you know, ideally it would be before the issuance of a building permit, but I know that probably won't always work out that way. But if documentation can be provided to the zoning office that the FAA has said no to, you know, these turbines.
So how soon can that information be provided to us? I mean, that's from what I'm hearing, it's gonna be past the
I-
building permit
Like
point.
ideally, it would be around the building permit.
Okay.
There's a potential. I mean, like, yeah, ideally we would have it for you at the building permit. So I mean, the way it's written now, you could say approved by FAA or like something where we have to show the documentation that FAA is requiring that we can't have ADLS.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, we understand your concern too. Like you don't want developers trying to like sneak a fast one past you and not have ADLS. That's not what I'm trying to get at here. You know, if you require the developer to show that the FAA is requiring traditional lighting at the top of the towers, I think that would make both parties here happy, or all parties are happy.
We have it, hold on, Mike. We have it in the solar that you can change based off of design or based off of new technology, or maybe not technology, but I'm trying to think how we've got it in there where the zoning office can offer a waiver without having to go to, you know what I'm talking about, Alice, or am I just talking?
If they change like the location of equipment and whatnot. Yes,
Do we have that in here?
I thought it was.
I thought it was too. I just gotta find it. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I would say, Mike Book here, I would say if we gotta have lights on top of the towers because the FAA says so, then that's something that's undesirable. You know, and if it's for a pair of towers, then we don't want the towers there. I mean, move the towers so that we can have ADLS. I mean, you know, that's something that's been a big deal to us on the county level is how do we, you know, and a lot of angst from a lot of people is like on those flashing red lights, like if you can't have ADLS on there, then you can't have a tower. Like, you know, if the FAA says it's going to take a traditional light, then that's not something we want. That's the whole point of putting in there that we want ADLS. Right? I mean, and where my understanding of ADLS is that the light goes on when aircraft approach. I mean, you know, I may be misunderstanding that, but that's what we're aiming for.
For all
So-
practical purposes, that's exactly what it is.
So like, I get what you guys are saying, like FAA maybe say, well, that isn't allowed in this particular circumstance. And we're saying, or I'm saying like, okay, well then, you know, we don't want the tower there. I don't know how common that is, but that's the whole point of requiring this.
I would say, I mean, it's probably uncommon that that's going to happen. We're just trying to make sure that this county is open to wind and wind projects in the future. And just wanted to bring this to your attention because it could be a project killer and it could result in a developer leaving and going to an adjacent county if they can't put traditional lightings because FAA is not approving that.
Okay, well, I think that's a risk we should be willing to stand.
Marilyn, go ahead. Sorry.
You know, the lighting is the big annoyance to a lot of people. Once the turbines are up, yeah, you see them in the daytime. You know, where I live, I can't see them in the daytime, but I can see those blinking lights. And it's distracting. I don't like the look of the blinking lights. So if we can have ADLS, that eliminates that problem. You know, I'm with what Mike says, you know, if we can't do ADLS on turbine, then we don't do the turbine.
I like it. I'm trying to stay in between, right? As the chair, like, you gotta stay between the committee or the board and developers, but to a certain point, this is what we want. Let's just,
You know, we want what we want for the county. And
Right.
if it's a hardship for the developers and they need to move on, I'm sorry. It's not something we want in the county, so move on.
So if the FAA says that ADLS is not appropriate for any of the towers in the project, then the whole project goes away.
But you weren't
Sure.
talking.
No,
I
but
think
I'm
so.
saying we have a project where FAA has said ADLS is not appropriate for any of the towers in the project. So what I'm asking you is that if that's what the FAA says, you're saying that the entire project goes away.
I think so. I mean, why would ADLS even exist if it couldn't be used?
In a circumstance where it's only on a small handful of the turbines and the project could still exist in this county, not allowing those towers to be built will be taking money directly away from those landowners that could be making substantial amounts of money from having those turbines on their property. So just another angle to consider
Yeah.
for annoyance of neighbors or someone else. You are taking money away from a landowner and from a taxing district that turbine would directly support. So certain schools would not be receiving the property tax income from having those turbines there. So just things to consider. We understand the annoyance of maybe having a couple blinking red lights, but the direct impacts long-term are taking money away from landowners on their own property as well as from certain school districts.
That assumes that there will not be other opportunities for other landowners in Lee County.
I'm not in favor of
And that-
letting ADLS be a project killer. I mean,
No one is.
basically, we would prefer to see less lights going forward. And I think that by incorporating that language into the ordinance, that we, eliminate as many as we can going forward.
Right.
But
And
I
that
don't
gives-
want to lose out on taxes and other benefits to landowners, like they say, just because, one turbine can't have, the lighting.
You know, we're concerned about protecting the county. And people get protecting the county and the revenue for the county or the revenue for the landowner confused with the issue. And this is for protection of the county. If it happens, it happens. You know, we all appreciate the revenue for the government bodies, for the landowners. But, we also have to look at protection.
And this is about also setting the expectations and giving certainty to developers who come here. It's the whole reason we do these ordinances. If you know ahead of time, hey, here's what the rules are, that should be helpful.
Mr. Kitson.
Just for the benefit of our conversation, what are the reasons the FAA would not approve those lights? We're talking about one or two here or there. I assume near an airport, but what other reasons would they not approve?
I would assume near an airport as well. This is an area that exceeds my level of expertise, so I don't know. Again, I'm working with the mindset of in the event of, but hopefully unlikely. So, I have not, I think you mentioned you've been on a project, so she could probably answer this better than I could. But I'm thinking for our project, this won't be an issue. I'm just looking out for the county and for future, opportunity for the county to bring in additional business.
When dealing with flight paths for Air Force or something like that, they do not want, and it's not just the FAA, it's Homeland Security, they don't want the light system, they don't want the notification of flights going through. They want the constant system. So there's not a on off thing so that people know when planes are going through. They want the
Again, I understand they're private aircraft, but if we build planes come out of Chicago, they're not gonna set these planes off, are they?
no, those are not, right.
Okay.
Yeah, those are high enough.
That would also be an annoyance. It's like going on and off. all the
Oh,
time.
right.
Okay.
But anything like crop dusting, anything in the area like that would set it off.
But you can't crop dust that.
No, but I mean, those are the size
That's fine.
plates. That's the size. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to have a
Yep.
little better understanding of
Yep.
why they work, why they're used, why they wouldn't. Thank you.
I think it's one of those things that you either have to put your foot in the ground and say, this is what we're gonna live with, and it's gonna be ADLS, or this is where we're gonna waver on and say, we want ADLS, but
Right.
we're
I
willing
mean,
to
there's,
make accommodations.
yeah, if we're not gonna have good standards, why bother?
The
I say
shipper,
stick with the ADLS.
period, end of story. I agree with the shipper. Mr. Kitson? It's a tough spot, right?
It
Like,
is, because you could have 30 windmills and 2 of them happen to be in the wrong spot. And we lose the whole project, or they can't be moved. It's just-
mhm. But at the same time, you don't know what you don't know. We could get into some of these projects and none of the windmills could say, no, all of them are perfectly fine. We're doing hypothetical speaking right now,
we
so
are. That's the problem.
we're playing, like I said, back to my point, I'm gonna play the ignorance card and
None of
say,
us-
we don't know what we don't know until we try
Have
to.
enough information.
So I'm kind of with you guys. Let's put our foot in the ground and say ADLS, and if we have to reevaluate, then we can go through waivers and stuff like that. But I think the foot in the ground is ADLS, and that's that. Personally.
That's the new.
Yeah, I agree.
Need to embrace.
Yeah.
You leave them? I wanna tell Courtney congratulations for later this week. I don't know where you guys are at. You guys want to pass this on? Are we ready? Is there any other additional comments in regards to this?
I think, can we run this by Boonstra? The questions that have been brought up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they all do. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not ready to pass it on until we see a final draft. I mean. we
Yeah,
get these emails that says final draft, and we get it at the last minute, and then we've got changes.
I'm very much with you, and knowing that we only have, this is the win, we still have solar to come through, which,
Well, and the reason this final draft came this late is because we were rushing to get it done. You know, if you remember.
Yeah, I realize that. but-
But no, I
Yeah,
agree. with what
especially
you're
given
saying.
the long-term nature of these
Reason
projects,
for it
like,
was, you know, we were rushing.
And that's, we don't want to rush things.
Right.
we look at a calendar real quick.
You know, if we're bumping up against our moratorium, then we need to. extend
We're
it.
already extending the moratoriums at this point, so you'll see it on tomorrow's properties that it will be, I proposed extending it 3 more months. I didn't want to,
Let's
but
reduce it.
that's
Let's get it done before the.
that's the reality of where we stand, so. I say the 6th, September 6th.
We have a budget meeting that day.
Good for you.
Well, 9 o'clock budget. Let's wrap it up so quick, real quick.
Okay. Alice, what would your suggestion be? Like,
We could do the, 5th is foreclosed.
Fifth is Labor Day.
Liberty.
if it's Labor Day, you could do the
Second?
7th. The what?
The 2nd, Friday, the 2nd.
I can do the 2nd. I'm fine with that.
Works for me.
Okay, we'll set the next renewable energy meeting for the 2nd at 9 AM.
Will we just be looking at wind, or will we have solar at that time also?
We should have solar by that time. I was anticipating it for this morning and it did not arrive, so.
Okay, if anybody has anything specifically about the ordinances as they see them, please call me or Alice prior to the meeting to discuss. And let's try to get these two done for this moving into September. So
Is there any way when we get a new draft of these things that we can receive them in onboard?
Yes, and I'm trying to work that out with Becky, but unfortunately I was waiting on the solar draft to come through this weekend and it didn't. So I had to send out the wind yesterday and while I included Becky on the email, I don't think she had enough time to get it onto onboard.
And I
So,
understand it's, the time it came out, but we didn't really have time to review it either.
right.
okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn if we don't have anything else.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you, everybody.